Okay, everyone, I hope you're all well. This is the last lesson on Parliament. What we're going to look at today, I'm going to quickly go over what I said you last Thursday. And then the final bit we need to do is a little bit about should they reform the House of Lords, and then that's it on Parliament. The next topic area is on the executive, which is basically the Prime Minister, the ministers, those sorts of people. I've not had time yet to put the stuff onto Teams. I'll put the booklet and stuff on. I'll probably do it today, and I'll put the rest of the stuff on at some point during the week. It'll be Thursday anyway before I do my next video at the earliest. So by then at least have some of those bits on. So previous lessons then, we've been looking at how Parliament and its relationship with the executive. And if you remember, I had to do that sheet, which is normally cut and stick exercise, about things in the government's favour, things in the Parliament's favour. I mean, regarding the House of Commons, basically every government has a majority in order to be the government. Even Theresa May did; she had to work with the DUP, but that relationship with the DUP gave a majority of one. And so therefore that enables that the government in theory should win every single vote in Parliament, in the House of Commons anyway. Secondly, a government minister, the leader of the House, who's very much involved in the timetabling of the House of Commons, again is a member of the government. So these things are very much in the government's favour. So lots of things you might say that the government has a lot of influence over Parliament, and the UK Parliament is quite weak on. I should really say the House of Commons for these particular points. Think about those legislative committees as well, how the governing side is always a majority on those committees, and the whips are very much involved in choosing the people on those committees. On the other side of the argument, though, governments with small majorities have got less control over Parliament. Look at Theresa May and all those defeats she had over Brexit. And governments with small majorities and a divided party, Theresa May and John Major spring to mind, are particularly vulnerable to Parliament and the House of Commons. Regarding the House of Lords, the government has less control over the House of Lords, mainly because no government has a majority in the House of Lords. The parties are more evenly split, I suppose. You've got all those crossbenchers who are independents on there as well. Also, the whips have got less influence as well in the House of Lords, because if you're in the House of Lords, you basically you're either at the end of your career and you're there to be an expert, in which case you don't really care if whips threaten you with stuff. You can't be removed from the House of Lords unless you're just really bad, and so you can just say to your whips, well, sod off, basically. So the government's got far less control over the House of Lords. However, there are some conventions in place regarding the House of Lords, because they are unelected, like the Salisbury Convention, whereby they can't really destroy things which are in a government manifesto. So hopefully that cutting and sticking you had to do gave you some ideas about this relationship between the two. And as I said before, it's not a static relationship. Every parliament is slightly different, and a lot of it depends on that government majority and how united the governing party is. Theresa May's parliament, for example, very different to the one which Boris Johnson currently has. Okay, Tony Blair with those big majorities, a united Labour Party for a good period of his time in office. Parliament was really weak, whereas John Major's Parliament in the years before Blair was a bit like Theresa May's, lots of divisions, government losing votes, that type of stuff. Okay, you then had to do this table on how effective is Parliament holding the government to account, majority size, party unity, and a son of the House of Lords. I hope that kind of made sense and was fairly straightforward. So party unity is how united is your party. So obviously, if you've got a governing party which is divided like Theresa May faced or John Major, it's then a bit more difficult to get your backbenchers to do what you want. If the majority of your party is small as well in the House of Commons, that makes it even more tricky. The Lords being assertive, this really affects the coalition when they kind of said, well, is a coalition, what's the manifesto basically? The Salisbury Convention came under strain because some things which the coalition did were in one party's manifesto but not the other, and so the House of Lords claimed that they hadn't been elected on that manifesto. And things like the fact the House of Lords is unelected, so it can be a bit more assertive sometimes, especially in amending legislation and using its powers of delay. So hopefully all that kind of made sense. I also asked you for homework to do that stuff on the opposition as well. And it's just to get the idea that the opposition is really important, plays an important role. Keir Starmer, the current Labour Party leader, is the leader of the opposition, Her Majesty's opposition, and they do play an important role in Parliament. Scrutinising and asking questions is an important function of Parliament towards the executive, and it should help the executive perform better. So if they know the opposition is quite strong, ministers have to think about before they say things what they're going to do, which should in theory therefore lead to better decisions being made. Okay, the final two bits then. There's a table called How Effective is Parliament at Fulfilling its Parliamentary Functions? I've made this table thinking if they asked an exam question along these sorts of lines, if valid the view that Parliament is no longer effective, that very general type of question, these would be kind of the points that you could make. You could do a paragraph about representation, you could do a paragraph about legislating, a paragraph about scrutiny. I think they would be my main three for that type of essay. But I've also put in some of those other functions which we looked at the very beginning of Parliament, things like source of legitimacy, recruitment of government ministers, that type of stuff. So what I want you to do basically is, using all your knowledge, is think about how does Parliament fulfil those functions effectively. I mean, for example, recruitment of ministers, well, I suppose it's a convention really, isn't it? But all ministers come from Parliament, so it is really effective at that, isn't it? Most of them are from the House of Commons, and you could give a few examples, the current Chancellor is an MP, isn't he, for Richmond in North Yorkshire, for example. I can't think for that particular one how it's not effective at choosing ministers. But then things like scrutiny of the government, that's things like departmental select committees, Prime Minister's questions, all that type of stuff. Think about how it's effective at doing that, but then think about what would your counterpoint be. However, it does have these problems with scrutinising the executive. So if you do that, hopefully it should be relatively straightforward. And then the final bit, really, I'm not sure how important this is on the current course. It was on the old one, and I kind of kept it on. Should the House of Lords be reformed? Is it right that Britain has a parliament where half of it is unelected? And it's growing in numbers as well. There's over 800 members of the House of Lords at the present time. Or does it do a good job? It might not be elected, but actually that gives it a certain added strength. They don't care about the whips, for example. The House of Lords can use its expertise. Would Alan Sugar, for example, who's in the House of Lords, bother going through elections and stuff? Probably not. Therefore, would we lose a potential business expert to look over legislation to deal with business, for example? So what I've done, last year when I did this for the other class last year, I did like a slide with some of the arguments for and against. It's the easiest way to do it. And what you need to do is decide which of those points, which I'll put onto the email I send out, which of them would suggest the House of Lords should be reformed, which of them suggest the House of Lords should not be reformed. There is on Teams as well, there's a section called Parliamentary Reform, and there's an article about Lords Reform. Feel free to have a look at that. I can't remember the top of my head whether it's in Jenkins and the Lynch textbooks. But again, have a quick look through the Parliament chapter, and if it mentions Lords Reform or whatever, then have a quick read of it, make sure the points I made out you fully understand them. I don't think it'll be an exam question, but it's worth just knowing anyway, just in case they do put it on. Okay, so that then should finish us off with Parliament. I'll probably do an exam question for you all to do in a week. I'm not going to do it this week. I might do it the week after. I might do it a couple of weeks into the next topic, one on this. So I will set a question on this for you to do in the not too distant future. Any problems, send me an email and let me know. As I said, on Thursday, we'll start off the executive. And then after the executive, we've only got to do one more little topic, which is the Supreme Court and the EU. And then we're all done and dusted for the summer holidays. Okay then, I will see you all on Thursday.